Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about 7 skills that I believe are essential in the process of overcoming enmeshment and doing self-differentiation work. So let's get started. So just as a disclaimer, first and foremost, I'm talking about these 7 essential skills in the context of overcoming enmeshment, but they're really just life skills that I think will help you in general live a better life in the context of all your relationship systems. So these are life skills for adult life that I think are vital. So see them as, yes, the skills that you need to develop in order to overcome enmeshment, but see them as so much more than that in their ability to help you live a better life in adulthood. So first and foremost, when we're working to overcome enmeshment, we need to develop systems thinking. We need to be able to see our family system as a network of interconnected and interrelated individuals. And each person is impacting the other person in a way that creates the way the entire system functions. So mom and dad, the way mom and dad relate to each other and whatever problems they have in their relationship is going to affect, brother and sister. So the functioning and the mental health and the emotional stability of brother and sister are actually impacted by the level of stability and well-being between mom and dad's relationship. So we are a social species and we are emotionally wired to each other, and the family system, the different members of the family system especially so, because that is how the family evolved in nature, was to be emotionally connected to each other in order to help each other survive and adapt to life's inevitable challenges, mainly of survival, right, throughout our evolutionary history. Now, emotions evolved in order to help facilitate this togetherness, this ability to come together and help each other survive. So the emotional attachments we have with our family system are incredibly, incredibly powerful. Our emotions are kind of like mixed up in the emotions of other people in our system. It's like electricity, an electrical current that passes from person to person. In family systems theory, we call this systems anxiety. And that systems anxiety is contagious. So a brother or a sister or even some extended member of the family, like a grandparent, may be experiencing anxiety, and that trickles down to every other person in this system through the patterns of interaction, of relational interactions that they have with each other. So the more you understand your family as a system and learn to see the patterns and the processes and the roles of that system, the more you will be able to understand yourself, and the more you will be able to get yourself out of the patterns that are no longer serving you in your adult life. Because of this interconnectedness of systems, we carry the patterns that we learn in our family system into other relationship systems in our adult lives. So the marriage that we have, our own family of creation, so the children and the spouse that we choose, and then also other relationship systems such as the friend group that we're a part of, or maybe we're part of a faith community. Maybe we serve a prominent role there. We have a leadership role, for example, and we get caught up in the relational interactions of that system. Maybe it's the organization we work for. Maybe we have a leadership role there, and we get really caught up in the emotions and the relationships that we have there as well, because we're carrying those patterns that we learned in our family system now into other relationship systems that also have emotional interconnectedness with each other. So systems thinking is going to help you learn how to, 1, observe enmeshment patterns within yourself and within your relationships with others, and 2, become more self-differentiated by working through that enmeshment and those patterns. So systems thinking is vital. It's an essential skill for overcoming enmeshment and for self-differentiation. But I also think, in general, it is a great life skill for adulthood, because you start to see how people are interacting with each other, and you start to recognize the emotional patterns and the interactions that are relationship-based. And this gives you a lot of leverage and a lot of wisdom to work with in day-to-day relational life. Secondly, emotional grounding. Because of what I just said, emotional grounding is vital. So you can think of this also as self-regulation. Sometimes people refer to this as self-regulation, but it's the ability to notice when we are getting caught up in the emotions of the system and then ground ourselves. So come out of that, regulate ourselves back down out of that reactivity so that we can still access our thoughtfulness. We can still remain calm and reflective and more wise, I guess, in our next move that we make. So emotional grounding is it's an incredibly important skill. And you can think of it again also as self-regulation, which is just the ability to regulate ourselves when we notice we're getting a little bit dysregulated. And this has enormous impact also on the systems that we are a part of. Just like I said, anxiety is contagious, calm and maturity is also contagious. If you've ever been around a person who's very calm and very grounded in the way that they respond to you, you may find yourself also feeling more calm after you leave their presence or when you are in their presence. So this is a vital skill. If you can be the emotional grounding force in the different anxious systems that you are a part of, this is going to reap so much benefits in your own personal life, but also in the different relationship systems that you are a part of. So maybe that means learning to be more regulated and more emotionally grounded in your family of origin, the enmeshed family of origin that's likely highly anxious. But it could also mean that you carry that emotional grounding skill now into your role as a leader in the organization you work with, or if you work with clients directly, for example, if you're a helping professional of some kind and you're here listening, you're going to find that you can be a regulated presence for your clients who are likely going to come in and be anxious with all sorts of things going on in their lives. Or it can mean that you are the calm, grounding force in your own family of procreation. So your children may find that you are an incredibly emotionally stable resource for them, and this helps them in their development. So maybe being the parent that you never had, both for yourself and for your children. So emotional grounding is an amazing skill because think of it as like the electrical current in an electrical system. When electricity is passing from place to place in that system, and then there's the ground, the thing that like grounds that current so it doesn't get lost or get, intensify in a way that it burns everyone out. If you can be that grounding force by basically not taking on the electricity and intensifying it even more, that is to say, not getting emotionally reactive, bringing yourself back down to calm, this is going to be an incredible resource for every relationship system that you're a part of. And also, it's going to save you a lot of chronic stress in your life, because the problem with taking on everybody else's anxiety and emotions in the different relationship systems we're a part of is that we then become chronically stressed. We're in a chronic state of emotional activation, of anxiety that isn't even ours. It's simply that we're taking on everyone else's anxiety. So we have to learn how to emotionally ground ourselves, how to self-regulate, so that everybody else's anxiety remains their own anxiety and we don't take that on unless it's completely necessary to do so. Okay, so the next skill is mental autonomy. One of the things that happens when we grow up in a family system that's enmeshed is that there's like this family mind. Everybody believes the same thing, and you have to participate in that belief system else you're seen as the outsider, right? There's no room for individual thinking or for people to bring different ideas or to think outside of the box. That is to say, to think outside of the family mind. It's we believe this and we don't do that, and we are like this and we're not like that. And you get caught up in those belief systems. It's like those belief systems are implanted in your mind, and then you go out and you internalize that, and you go out into the world and you carry those beliefs into basically everything you do in life, and you don't even recognize that those beliefs are not necessarily yours and maybe not helpful for you in your life. So it may be more helpful to actually start breaking those beliefs. And the way you do that is to develop mental autonomy. You actually spend time thinking for yourself and questioning the beliefs that you carry around in your everyday life. So maybe that's a belief about yourself, right? Maybe that's a negative belief, an internalized voice that you had in your family system. Your family always said you were lazy. And maybe you grew up to believe that you're actually lazy. And maybe you start to challenge that belief and you start to think, man, I wasn't lazy. I was actually just, struggling with my mental health and having a really hard time engaging with life. Or maybe it's a belief about other people, right? So maybe your family taught you to believe something about some other group of people that look and think different than your family. And now you kind of have to break that belief so that you can begin kind of developing outside of that, maybe opening up to these other types of people and actually beginning to engage and see them in a new way. So challenging the family mind is super important. And in the process of that, you also have to develop your own thinking and your own belief system. And that takes time and effort. You have to kind of work through these beliefs one by one. But it's learning also to think for yourself and learning what you uniquely value in your life. What is your own belief system? What are the things that you value? What are your principles for living? Not what your family expects you to value or what your family wants you to believe, but rather what you have spent time thinking through and questioning and have come to believe and want for yourself and want to, live your life like. So who you want to associate with, how you want to spend your time, what kind of career you want to have, what you believe about other people, what you believe about yourself, etc., and so on. So this is a process known as developing mental autonomy. The skill is mental autonomy, which is to be autonomous in our thinking, to be able to think for ourselves and not take on everyone else's thinking as our own. The fourth skill is the ability for internal validation. Now, I think this is honestly one of the most important skills in the process of self-differentiation and overcoming enmeshment, because when we grow up in enmeshed family systems, we learn that we have to do what everybody else expects of us. We play a role for the family, and they design that role for us. They write the script of our lives for us, and we have to just continually meet their expectations and do what they want and what they expect and what they will approve of. So we learn to, and this is sort of like endemic in society. If you look out to society, everybody's always fishing for likes and fishing to, look the same or look the best out of everyone. It's a very externally oriented way of living where you're constantly focused on what do others think of me? How do others see me? Do others approve of me? Do others like me? Do others want to give me attention? Do others love me? And what direction should I take my life based on what everyone else is doing or what everyone else is going to approve of? So we live our lives based on external validation. We learn this in our enmeshed family systems because we're expected to play a certain role for them, and we fear their rejection and we fear their disapproval, or we fear that they're going to have some type of emotional reaction if we do things differently than they expected or wanted from us. So in our lives, in our adult lives, through the self-differentiation process, it's important to learn to develop internal validation, which is to say, you know what, I'm going to do something because I value it, because I believe it's the right thing for me, and it's going to look different than what everyone else expects or wants of me, but I'm not here to live my life based on what they approve of or don't approve of. I need to validate myself. I need to approve of myself. And so it's about getting in touch with our internal guidance system, listening to that inner voice, right? The inner voice of the authentic self, and learning to live from that space and validate ourselves and approve of ourselves, even when no one else in our lives necessarily agrees or approves of what we're doing or what we think or what we want or what we believe or what we feel. So internal validation is a vital skill. So the next skill is boundaries, and I've talked extensively about this skill here on my channel. So I won't go in too deep with it, but just understand that you're probably not going to be able to do this process if you don't develop an understanding of what boundaries are, what your boundaries are going to look like in the context of your different relationships, and then how to do boundaries and how to stick through the very hard and challenging process of setting boundaries and enforcing boundaries, and then changing boundaries and evolving boundaries over time. So boundaries are a vital skill. I have many videos already on this topic, and I'm going to be putting out a ton more, so be sure to watch those, but just know that boundaries are essential. And I also, one book that I really recommend is called Boundaries, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. I'm going to link it below. It's a very practical guide to boundaries, literally how to, like, explicit exercises on how to say certain boundaries in very specific scenarios. So I'm going to link that resource here below. If you all are interested, I do recommend it for further reading and further study on your journey. And the next skill is what I refer to as distress tolerance or emotional stamina. They're pretty much the same thing, and I refer to them both. I use both terminologies here on my channel. But this is the ability to endure the inevitable discomfort that the journey of overcoming enmeshment and self-differentiation work requires. It is a very uncomfortable journey. Growth is very uncomfortable sometimes. And I think we all think we want to grow, and sometimes we just don't realize the very challenging emotions that the growth process can bring up in us. So we have to have distress tolerance. We have to develop emotional stamina. We have to recognize that as we start to differentiate and interrupt the patterns that we've always had in our family system and stop playing the roles that we've always played in our family system and starting to set boundaries and starting to do things differently and starting to, do things in a way that others disapprove of, they're going to push back, they're going to guilt trip us, they're going to judge us, they're going to misunderstand us. It's going to be uncomfortable for you. And you have to understand that this discomfort is a necessary part of the growth process. And you have to endure that. You have to learn how to tolerate that tension and that anxiety. Setting a boundary is not always going to feel good. You may feel anxious for days afterwards if it was a really hard boundary in a really tense situation with a really important person. So learn to accept and to sort of embrace this discomfort and tolerate the distress and endure the difficult emotions on this process. So again, distress tolerance, which now should become very obvious what that means, is tolerating the distress of actually doing the differentiation work, as well as emotional stamina, which is to kind of stay in the really hard, difficult tasks that this journey requires. And then last but not least, one of my favorites is what I call the subtle art of not, and I'm not going to say the bad word here on my channel so that the video doesn't get like demonetized or anything, but the subtle art of not giving an F, which is a book by Mark Manson, a very popular book. Maybe some of you have read it. If not, you need to read this book. It's a short read, it's an easy read, and it has everything to do with self-differentiation work. It's also funny, and it's been super helpful for me on my journey, and it's a book that I recommend to all my clients, and I think almost every one of my clients has liked this book. And it really talks about this idea that when we're doing self-differentiation work, which is to say when we're coming into our own, when we're developing our own individual identity, and we're getting out of that enmeshment, we have to kind of learn how to delegate whose opinions matter to us and whose opinions need to roll off of our shoulders. So the subtle art of not giving an F is not about becoming somebody who doesn't care about anything. It's about understanding that as humans, we have limited time and energy every day when we wake up, and we can only dedicate that energy to specific places. So we have to learn how to prioritize where we give our Fs to, right? So it's not necessarily about not giving any Fs, but choosing our Fs wisely and then dedicating our energy toward that, and everything else needs to fall by the wayside. So in the process of self-differentiation, this is going to be essential. You're going to have to learn how to prioritize whose approval, whose opinion, whose validation matters to you, whose energy, whose time matters to you, and everything else you're going to have to learn how to develop a filter or a block or set boundaries with. Because when we grow up in enmeshed systems, we learn to be overly sensitive to what everybody has to say, and people are always coming at us with their opinions, and we're always like bending and morphing and contorting ourselves in order to meet their expectations or to protect from their disapproval, because we don't want to feel the discomfort of their disapproval or their judgment or their criticism, but we have to learn how to not care about that. That is a vital skill on the self-differentiation journey. People are going to say all kinds of things about you. At the end of the day, you need to be at peace with yourself, with your actions, with your beliefs, with your life choices. You internally validate yourself. You need to be at peace with your actions, with your decisions. And what other people have to say about you is not your business. It's their business. It's their projection. And we'll talk a lot more about projection here on this channel. But again, coming back to it, the essential part of this skill is to learn how to stop reacting and to stop giving energy and attention to opinions and criticisms of people that don't matter. Now, again, we're human beings, we're social beings. We do have a need for the approval and the validation of others. But the point here is to choose who those others are very wisely. I mean, I really think it should be like 2 or 3 people that you trust in your life to give you opinions and to give you, to give you their approval on things. And those are people who you feel like really understand you, really respect you for who you are, and are not trying to get you to be what they want you to be, are actually trying to help you become a better version of who you want to become. So that is key. Again, I'm going to leave the book linked here. It's actually a fantastic book for basically every skill I've talked about here, on this video today. So you should definitely read it. But remember, that last skill, vital, the subtle art of not giving an F. So learning where your Fs go, learning what to care about, and then disregarding everything else. All right, you all. So there you have it, 7 skills on the journey of self-differentiation, of overcoming enmeshment. If you have questions, remember that I do a live private Q&A every month, and I answer your questions. So I'm going to leave the subscription or it's a totally free Q&A that I do every month. So I'm going to leave it here linked below for you all. You have to subscribe to my email newsletter, haha. And that way you'll get a link that you can submit your question to me, and then I will answer your question in my monthly video. And then as always, if you have questions, you can also leave them in the comments in this video below, and that way we will interact more with each other over time. And I always pull questions to make new videos. All right, everyone, take care. Thank you so much for being here, and until next time.